The first time Lydia saw her reflection blink before she did, she laughed. The second time, she dropped the glass in her hand and watched her blood pool across the white tiles like ink spreading through a lie. By the third time, she'd locked every mirror in her apartment behind sheets of black cloth. But the image kept following her, in the subway, in car windows, on the back of her eyelids. A second face, hers, but not, always watching. Always 1 second too late, and when her landlord finally opened the sealed room at the end of the hallway, she understood. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a memory clawing its way back. Lydia Morrow moved into the old brownstone on Fort Greene's eastern edge in early spring, the kind of crisp April where the trees bloomed before the air warmed. She was 2 months clean, 4 months out of inpatient, and still afraid of crossing streets too quickly. The doctors had called it dissociation, a coping response to trauma, but Lydia called it blankness. Like someone else had worn her skin for a while and left the sleeves wrong when they gave it back. The apartment was small, too bright in the mornings but cheap and quiet, exactly what she needed. She worked nights at a 24-hour diner in Borum Hill, where the smell of fryer oil masked the jitter in her bones. No one asked questions there. She liked it that way. For weeks, the only sounds in the building came from the radiator pipes and the occasional rustle of footsteps from upstairs. Then one night, around 2 a.m., Lydia woke to the sound of crying. Soft at first, choked, coming from the end of the hall. She opened her door and peered down the corridor. The hallway light buzzed overhead. Everything was still, except for the muted, breathless sobs that echoed from behind the door marked 6B, the one with a padlock and a rusted "Do Not Enter" sign half-hanging from the frame. The next morning, Lydia asked the landlord about it. "Oh, that?" He scoffed. "Storage. No one's lived in there for years." "But I heard—" "Old pipes," he interrupted, tapping the side of his head. "This place creaks. You'll get used to it." She tried to, for a while. But the crying didn't stop. It came every few nights, always from 6B, always in that same trembling, trapped rhythm. And then came the mirrors. At first, just her bathroom. She'd be brushing her teeth and swear the reflection's mouth moved a second late. One night, she watched it smile while her real face stayed blank. She blamed it on sleep deprivation, on the meds, on the hospital, until she caught her reflection watching her sleep. It was 3:17 a.m., and she'd stumbled half awake to the kitchen for water. She passed the hallway mirror. Something about it made her stop. The air went cold. Her reflection stood still, then blinked, 1 second too late, and grinned. She fell backward, shattered the glass. Blood. Shock. Silence. The landlord found her the next day, unconscious on the tile. He didn't call 911, just mumbled something about another one, and dragged her to bed. When she woke up, 6B's door was open, just a crack, inside, darkness. A mirror leaned against the wall, and in it, her reflection was already waiting. Lydia didn't remember walking to room 6B. One moment she was lying in bed, the faint tang of blood still drying on her skin, and the next she stood barefoot on the dusty hardwood of the forbidden apartment. The door was ajar, groaning on its hinges like it hadn't been moved in years, but the air inside was warm, lived in. And then there was the mirror. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, freestanding against the far wall, not decorative, not framed, just raw glass, edges chipped and old, like it had seen things people shouldn't. There was no furniture in the room, no windows, just the mirror and her reflection, except it wasn't doing what she did. She raised her hand. The reflection didn't follow. Instead, it just stared at her. Not blankly, not passively, knowingly. Then it moved. Not a twitch, a deliberate, full step forward. Lydia recoiled, heart slamming. The reflection leaned in until its face filled the glass, eyes wide and shining, pupils pinpricks of something ancient. Its lips parted. Lydia heard her own voice, but warped, deeper, slower, like it had crawled through water to reach her. "You left me here," Lydia screamed. She didn't remember running, but she ended up on the sidewalk outside, wrapped in a neighbor's arms, sobbing into someone's flannel shirt. When she tried to explain, the mirror, the voice, they exchanged worried glances, asked if she needed help, asked if she'd taken anything she hadn't. Not in months. Back in her apartment, the hallway mirror was gone, vanished. She searched every room. Nothing. She even knocked on 6B, hard, desperate, but the door was locked again, the padlock back in place, the "Do Not Enter" sign newly stapled. And straight. As if the whole thing had been a dream. But she had the scars on her palms to prove the glass had broken. She had the voicemail from her boss, asking if she was okay, saying she hadn't shown up for work for 2 days. Her last memory was the night she cut her hand. Everything since then felt out of sync. She called her therapist. Voicemail. She called her mother. Disconnected. She stood in the middle of her apartment and screamed, loud and guttural, just to hear something real. But the echo sounded wrong, hollow, like the walls were listening. That night, she found another mirror. This one small, a handheld compact buried in a drawer she swore she hadn't opened since she moved in. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The reflection stared back, calm, expressionless, then blinked, too late, and smiled, and whispered, "We need to talk. Lydia." Dropped the mirror. It didn't break, but the voice continued, from behind her this time. "I remember everything now, do you?" She turned around, but no one was there, only a shadow that didn't belong to her, and a memory surfacing from somewhere deep and rotted, a hospital, screaming, a locked room, a name tag she wasn't supposed to have. Lydia wasn't her name. The next morning, Lydia woke to find her fridge open, milk spilled across the floor in a thick white puddle. The milk was warm, the lights were off, and the kitchen clock blinked 12 marked like it had reset itself. Power outage. She checked her phone. Thursday, May 8th. She remembered it being Monday. She stumbled into the bathroom and turned on the faucet, trying to steady her breath. Her face in the mirror stared back at her. Still her, but not. The left eye twitched once, as if glitching, then stopped, and this time it didn't smile. It wept. Tears spilled from the reflection's eyes, even as Lydia's own face stayed dry. It looked so real, so full of terror, like it was begging her to remember, to listen. She backed away. "Stop," she whispered. "Just stop." But the reflection didn't obey. Its lips moved again, slow and thick. "That's not your name." She locked herself in the bedroom, heart pounding so hard she thought she might vomit. The memory of the hospital wouldn't leave her, but it didn't feel like a dream. It felt scrubbed, like someone had deliberately erased it. She searched through the few boxes she'd brought with her from rehab. Old notebooks, letters, the release forms from the clinic in Westchester. All of them listed her name as Lydia Morrow, all dated to early February, but everything before that, gone. No ID older than 4 months, no credit cards, no childhood photos, just one newspaper clipping, folded so many times it was nearly falling apart. Local woman found after 2-year disappearance, trauma suspected, name withheld. There was no photo, no details, just a date, November 11th, 2022, Lydia. If that was her name, felt the floor tilt beneath her. 2 years. She'd been gone for 2 years. That night she went back to 6B. The door was unlocked. Inside, the mirror stood in the center of the room now. Someone had lit a single candle on the floor. It flickered against the glass. The reflection was already there, not standing like before, sitting on a hospital bed. Pale blue gown, wristband. Lydia stepped closer. Her breath fogged the glass. She whispered, "Who are you?" The reflection looked up and said softly, "You were me." Flash. A memory slammed into her like a wave, a white hallway, her wrists bound, screaming. A doctor's voice, calm, clinical. She's experiencing a fugue state, severe dissociation. She's taken on a new identity. She gasped, staggered back. Her knees hit the wood, From the mirror, a scream. Raw, familiar. Her scream. And then a name floated up, barely a whisper in her mind, but it knocked the wind from her lungs. Elena. Elena Price, not Lydia. That wasn't her name. That was the one the hospital gave her after the fire, after the trial, after what she did, and then the mirror cracked, right down the middle, and behind the broken glass, a second face appeared. Not hers, not anymore. The next morning, Elena didn't leave her bed. She stared at the ceiling as dust filtered through a beam of light, floating like ash. Her hands trembled with a memory she couldn't touch. Something close, something just beneath the surface. A name she wasn't supposed to have. A life that had been overwritten. The mirror in room 6B was silent now, covered in spiderweb cracks but intact. She hadn't dared go back inside since the night it spoke. Instead, she turned to the only place she hadn't yet looked. The basement. The landlord wasn't home, or maybe he never was. She'd begun to suspect he was a shadow, just another part of whatever was unfolding here. She found the spare key taped to the inside of the fuse box and descended the creaking stairs with a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. The basement smelled of damp wood and old grief. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with rusted tools and boxes labeled with tenants' names. Most were empty, but one box on the far shelf was labeled Morrow L. She opened it slowly. Inside, papers, hospital forms, a journal, and a single Polaroid photo. It was a girl, her age, maybe younger, blonde, smiling wide with her arms wrapped around a man who had his face half turned from the camera. The background was a lakeside cabin. Summer. Bare feet on a wooden dock. Elena turned the photo over. In careful handwriting. Lake Harmony. August 2021. Elena plus Dad. Her breath stopped. Dad. The word hit her chest like a hammer. The girl in the photo wasn't just familiar. It was her, but younger. Warmer. Before something hollowed her out. She flipped through the journal next. The entries were scattered. Some frantic, others lucid. One stood out, dated November 1st, 2022. He said we were leaving that night. Said no one would understand. I packed the bags but didn't ask questions. He always said the truth was poison, that I couldn't survive it. I trusted him. I was wrong. I woke up 3 days later covered in smoke and glass. The lake house was gone. He was gone. They said I set the fire, that I killed him. Elena dropped the journal. Her mouth went dry. She remembered now. Not everything, not yet. But the way the cabin smelled at dusk. The way her father's hands trembled when he drank. The nights she'd wake to the sound of him pacing outside. Her door, the fire, the accusation, the name change. They hadn't locked her away just to treat her. They'd hidden her, covered her past in a new identity, a safe, forgetful one. A girl with no memories, no history. A blank slate, but her reflection remembered. And it wanted her to pay. That night, every mirror in her apartment was uncovered. She hadn't touched them. The one in the hall bore a message written in steam, though no one had showered. You were the fire. And behind her own reflection, a flicker of movement. The girl in the photo, older now, staring at her with empty eyes and holding a lighter in her hand. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, lights off, the Polaroid gripped between her fingers like a relic. Every mirror in the apartment glared back at her, uncovered, unblinking, like they were waiting. Judging. At 3:12 a.m., the hallway light flickered. Out. In the silence, she heard a click. Soft, metallic, like a lighter being flicked open. She crept toward the hallway, heart hammering, and stood before the mirror that had once seemed harmless. Just a decorative panel in the wall, forgotten. Like everything else in this building. Now it felt like a doorway. The girl inside was back, not just a reflection, not anymore. Her face was the same as Elena's, but frozen in an expression of pure rage. Her hands moved independently, lifting a silver lighter, flicking it open. Again and again. Flame, click, flame, click. On the wall beside the reflection, black scorch marks began to bloom, not in the mirror, but in the real world. The scent of smoke drifted through the hall. "Stop," Elena whispered, backing away. Elena finally leaned in, desperate. She heard it. "You let him burn." "You watched." She screamed and hurled the Polaroid at the mirror. The glass didn't crack, but the flame inside grew. Her apartment began to heat, sweat forming on her skin. And then the reflection did something it had never done before. It stepped out. No sound, no explosion, just a slow, seamless slide, as if the mirror was water and she'd broken the surface. The girl stood there, same face, same scars, but her eyes were dead. Elena ran. She bolted out of the apartment, down the stairs into the street. The night air bit at her lungs. She didn't stop running until she reached the payphone outside the bodega on Green and Washington. She called the only number she remembered that wasn't hers, the hospital. A receptionist answered, calm, robotic, Elmside Psychiatric. "How may I direct your call?" "I need to speak to Dr. Joseph Harding. He oversaw a patient, Elena Price." There was a pause. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said slowly. "Dr. Harding passed away in November. He was caught in a fire at his private practice. The patient files were lost." Another fire. Same month she woke up as Lydia. Her legs nearly buckled. She slid to the sidewalk, clutching the receiver, shaking. Was it possible? Had she returned home at dawn, walking like a ghost through a city that felt suddenly made of glass. As she approached her building, something new caught her eye. Room 6B's door was wide open. Inside, bare floorboards, peeling paint, and a charred hospital wristband lying on the mirror's base. She picked it up. Name, Elena Price. Status, suicidal. Observation, high-risk diagnosis, dissociative identity disorder, PTSD note, keep away from reflective surfaces. That night, she made a decision. She would break every mirror in the building, all except the one in 6B. That one, she needed to enter. She started with the bathroom, then the hallway, then the compact in her drawer. One by one, Elena smashed every mirror in her apartment, wielding a rusted claw hammer like a weapon. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the building, but no one came. No one asked. It was as if she were the only soul left in the place. Every time she shattered a reflection, the voice in her head screamed louder. Not words, just grief. Terror. The sound of someone trapped in a memory so old it had begun to rot. By the time she reached room 6B, her hands were bloodied and raw, small, shards buried in the skin like tiny white teeth. The door creaked open as she stepped inside, her breath fogging in the sudden cold. The mirror was waiting. It stood where it always had. But something was different now. The cracks were gone. Its surface was smooth, black, almost liquid. And there was no reflection, only darkness. She stepped forward. 1 pace. 2. Then without warning, the room tilted. The world spun. Her legs gave out and she dropped to her knees. The mirror began to ripple like water, and then she was pulled in. No transition, no sound. Just a sudden, brutal flip, and Elena found herself standing in a hospital corridor. Pale green walls, fluorescent lighting overhead, the smell of antiseptic and old metal. The hall was empty, but she knew this place, Elmside Psychiatric. She walked barefoot down the corridor. Doors lined each side, all closed, but at the end was one marked observation, secure. She reached for the handle. Inside, a single bed, white sheets. A girl sat huddled in the corner. Blonde, silent, skin pale as ash. Her wrists were bandaged. Her eyes shot up when Elena entered, and for the first time they didn't mirror her. They studied her, as if Elena were the ghost, and then the girl spoke. "You're the mask," she said, voice trembling. "You're the one they made to forget." Elena tried to speak, but no sound came. The girl stood slowly. Her body shook with a mix of fear and fury. "You let him hurt us," she said. "You kept the truth buried. You didn't want to see it." Elena backed away, breath shallow. "What did I do?" The girl moved closer. "You let it all happen. The cabin, the fire. You didn't kill him to escape. You stayed. You chose to stay, until he turned on you. And then, when the house burned," tears welled in her eyes, "you locked me away." Elena dropped to her knees. "No, I didn't know." The girl knelt with her, whispering, "You're not Lydia. You're not Elena. You're what was left." A flicker of fire danced in the girl's hands. "The truth lives in flame." Then the door slammed shut behind them. Elena turned and saw the mirror from 6B, now inside the room. Only this time, the reflection showed the lake house, a child screaming, a man holding a bottle, and the match falling. The final piece had not yet come, but she was almost there. Tomorrow would bring the fire again. The cabin was smaller than she remembered. Or maybe it was just the way memories shrink when you finally look them in the eye. Elena stood barefoot in the doorway of the reflection, the lake outside rippling in the wind, insects humming in the tall grass. Inside it was dusk, the hour when everything looks like a secret. She stepped in. The air smelled like whiskey and dust. The floorboards groaned beneath her. There were 2 plates on the table, one half full, the other untouched. A jacket slung over the back of a chair. Her father's jacket. She was back inside the memory, not just watching it, living it. "Elena," came his voice, deep, worn, and heavy with exhaustion. "Where'd you go?" She turned. He stood in the doorway, the bottle in his hand already half drained. His eyes didn't focus right. He wasn't a monster, just a broken man, but monsters don't always snarl. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they weep. "I thought we were okay now," he said softly, as if blaming her for something he couldn't name. "You said you forgave me." Forgiveness, she remembered. Being 12 years old and promising things she didn't understand. If she said the right words, he wouldn't hurt her. If she stayed quiet, maybe he'd change, but he never did. "You lied," she said now. His face hardened. "What did you say?" "You lied to me," she repeated, voice rising. "You said no one would find us. You said we were safe out here. But you didn't bring me here to protect me." She was shaking. "You brought me here to bury me." He moved fast. Too fast. She didn't remember grabbing the lighter, only that her hand was already holding it. She struck it once, twice. Flame. He froze. "Elena," he said. "Don't." But something else moved behind her eyes. Something deeper. The other girl, the one who'd screamed in the hospital, the one locked behind pills and sedation, the one who'd carried the fire all this time. She whispered, "I already did." And then it happened. Not as memory, but as truth. The flame leapt. The whiskey caught. Heat exploded across the room. She'd lit it, not to kill him, to end it, because no one was coming to save her. No therapist, no mother, no police report filed in time. Just fire and silence. And after the flames, when the world turned black, a girl woke up in a hospital with no name, no voice, and a mirror she could never look into again. Until now. Back in room 6B, the mirror shattered. Elena collapsed. Smoke rose from her skin, but there were no burns. Just scars, old, healed, and hers. And in the dust of the room, something glowed faintly beneath the hospital wristband. A tag, burned but legible. Patient, Nora M. Price not. Lydia, not Elena, Nora. Her real name, the final piece. She stood, walked, to the broken mirror, and looked at the face for the first time without flinching. The girl was gone. No second delay, no mimic, just her, whole. And in the hallway, for the first time in weeks, the light didn't flicker. It simply stayed on.